Welcome to DHB, Devotion, Health, and Beauty Recovery Network. I am DAA. DAA are my initials. We all experience loss on so many levels. Over the past few years, I have personally experienced the loss of beloved family members. Some of these family members were elderly or ill. I have also experienced the loss of friends and co-workers, acquaintances, as we all have. Some were children under the age of 18. Grief sits within. Let's walk together as we grieve one day at a time on this weekly podcast that will be posted each Sunday at 7 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Fair use. Grief, one day at a time. 365 Meditations to Help You Heal After Loss by Alan D. Wolfett. Fair use. February 19. No one ever told me grief felt so like fear. C.S. Lewis. Feelings of anxiety, panic, and fear are often part of our grief experience. Our sense of security has been threatened. So we are naturally anxious. We find ourselves wondering, am I going to be okay? Will I survive this? What might happen next? We may be afraid of what the future holds or that we will experience other losses. We may be more aware of our own vulnerability or mortality, which can be scary. We may feel panicky about our inability to concentrate. Financial problems can compound our feelings of anxiety. Essentially, all is not well in our worlds, which can make us feel anxious and afraid. Talking our fears through with someone who cares about us and can listen without simply telling us we don't need to be afraid is a way through. Working on self-calming techniques and rituals is another. The meditation reads, I will notice what calms me down when I feel afraid or anxious. I will turn to these healthy self-calming techniques whenever I need to. I will also speak my fears aloud to a good listener. February 20th. I've developed a new philosophy. I only dread one day at a time. Charlie Brown, Charles M. Schulz. Dread is the feeling of debilitating worry about something. It's the expectation that an upcoming experience is going to be terrible. In grief, it's normal to dread certain things. We might dread the anniversary of the death or the next holiday. We might dread going through our loved ones' things or sorting photos. More generally, we might dread the coming weeks and months because we expect them to be so very painful. While it's normal to feel dread, it's also within our power to change our expectations. After all, expectations aren't reality. They're our projection of what reality is going to be like. They're the story we're telling ourselves about what will happen. And have you ever noticed that things rarely turn out as badly as we expect them to? So maybe we can sometimes choose to expect more pleasant outcomes instead. The meditation reads: when I'm dreading something, I can choose to tell myself a more pleasant story of expectation instead. February 21. Everyone grieves in different ways. For some, it could take longer or shorter. I do know it never disappears. An ember still smolders inside me most days. I don't notice it, but out of the blue, it'll flare to life. Maria V. Snyder. We grievers are all susceptible to grief bursts. Even long, long after the death, something as simple as a smell, a word, a gesture, or a memory can bring our loss crashing back upon us. We gasp at the pain and may find ourselves sobbing. The experience brings us to our knees. Grief bursts may be draining, but they are also normal and natural. They are proof that our grief always lives inside us, and when something touches that grief, it flares to life. We can't prevent grief bursts, but we can learn to embrace them when they flare up. They simply let us know that our grief still needs our attention now and then. The meditation reads: the next time I experience a grief burst, I will stop what I'm doing and give it my full attention until it softens. Fair use. February 22nd. I wanted to talk to someone, but who? It's moments like this when you need someone the most that your world seems smallest. Rachel Kahn. For some of us, the person who died was our closest ally and best listener. Now we need to talk to someone about our grief, but the someone we need most is gone. Others of us have many acquaintances, but lack close confidants. So, whom do we talk to? We're faced with nurturing closer bonds with other people in our lives or finding new friends. Both can seem like daunting tasks. If we know someone who's naturally empathetic and a skilled listener, we can start there. We can try a counselor or support group. Someone who has experienced a similar loss is also a good possibility. When we need someone but no one's there, our worlds feel too small. We can break through the smallness by reaching out beyond our usual confines. The meditation reads: I can break through the smallness of my world to connect with others who will listen. February 23rd. Courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes courage is the little voice at the end of the day that says, I'll try again tomorrow. Mary Ann Rat Matcher. Remember the story about the lion crippled by a thorn stuck in his paw? He roared for help from his fellow creatures of the African plains, but only the tiny mouse was brave enough to approach and pull the thorn out. Lots of days our courage in grief is a tiny mouse. It seems small and weak. But if we call upon it, it can still take on little morning tasks that have great power. And yes, some days the tiny mouse that is our courage in grief won't emerge at all. When that happens, it's okay to embrace our temporary cowardice, which may simply be a legitimate need to remain inwardly focused, and try again tomorrow. The meditation reads, I believe that little squeaks of courage can do big things. My courage to actively mourn may be small and sometimes not emerge at all, but over time, regular small actions create life changing momentum. February 24, and I felt like my heart had been so thoroughly and irreparably broken that there could be no real joy again. That at best there might eventually be a little contentment. Everyone wanted me to get help and rejoin life, pick up the pieces and move on, and I tried to. I wanted to, but I just had to lie in the mud with my arms wrapped around myself, eyes closed, grieving until I didn't have to anymore. Anne Lamott. The mud days of our grief are powerful and painful, but there's no going around them. There's only surrendering to the pool of the mud and wallowing. Lots of people have been contaminated by our culture's avoidance of grief. These are the people who tell us to rejoin life, pick up the pieces, and move on. What they don't realize is they're offering bad advice. When we feel like lying in the mud with our arms wrapped around ourselves, that means it's time to lie in the mud with our arms wrapped around ourselves. We'll lie there until we don't have to anymore. The meditation reads, if I'm still in the mud days, I'm still in the mud days. If my mud days have been going on for months on end, it's time for me to see a grief counselor. Otherwise, I'm wallowing because I still need to wallow. Fair use. February 25. It's the great mystery of human life that old grief passes gradually into quiet, tender joy. Fortier Dostoevsky. Over time, our grief softens, but only if we find ways to actively explore and express it. The more we explore and express it, the quieter it becomes. Eventually, we find that our old, well mourned griefs transform into tender, bittersweet joys. The pain never goes away completely, but often takes on the burnished patina of vintage brass. Human life harbors many mysteries. Grief is one of the greatest. The meditation reads, the more I explore and express my grief with the passage of time, I will find it's transforming into bitter, sweet joy. Grief, One Day at a Time, 365 Meditations to Help You Heal After Loss by Alan D. Wolfed. Read by me, DAA of DHB, Devotion, Health, and Beauty Recovery Network. Please like, share, subscribe, and most of all, be the you that you are created to be. And remember that you are not alone.